Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast. We have Cameron Snow with us. Cameron is the co-founder at Danomics. It's an oil and gas production data analytics company. He does reservoir mapping, better, faster, stronger. So, Cam, I'm glad to have you on. Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Charles. So what I've been trying to do with Danomics is give geologists and reservoir engineers a new set of tools to interpret the subsurface. So we're trying to help them better quantify the oil and gas that's underneath the acreage that they're drilling, so they can produce that more economically. So that's what I'm trying to do. We've been at this now for about the last 6 years. Time flies in that regards. Before that, I was working as a geologist with a number of different oil and gas companies doing exploration drilling.
Interesting. And what prompted you to start that company?
Yeah, so what drove that was when I first started back in the early 2000s, we were drilling a lot of conventional wells. So that's more the old-fashioned type of well that we used to drill. And then we started drilling the horizontally fracked shale wells that you hear about now, things like the Permian Basin or the Bakken, that you'll hear about in the news every now and then. And there was a big disconnect in the way that we were doing interpretations. On one side, on the more conventional old-fashioned type of analysis, we were looking at one well at a time. And if you needed to look at 100 wells or 500 wells, then you would just look at, one well 500 times, right? You would just repeat the same process. So it was very inefficient. It didn't scale up to the new style of work that we were doing. And so we decided to build a new set of tools for the geologists that allowed them to scale their workflow. So that way, they didn't have to pick and choose what data they were looking at. They could look at all of the data across their place. They could look at thousands or tens of thousands of wells.
Interesting. And that one you've been running it for 7 years now. Like, what's been the growth like?
Yeah, so we started from scratch. So we started, with literally just an idea that we wanted to address this issue. So for the first, let's say, 6 months to a year, there were really no customers. We're having conversations with people. We discovered there was interest in the solution that we wanted to build, and then we had to go out and build it so we could actually demo it to companies. And I know in the startup world we often talk about validating the problem early on. In oil and gas, it's a very mature industry, very high bar to get new softwares into these old large companies. So we had to have something, a really an MVP before we were able to really even get in the door there. So for the first year, we were focused on a couple of key customers that wanted to back us in this venture. And then, since then, it's just been, growing, 20, 30, 40% a year, depending on, on how the industry's been doing. It obviously didn't help that we started this right before COVID. It sent the oil industry in kind of a crash for a bit, but things have been going well in the growth category.
And how did you survive the COVID event?
Yeah, so luckily we had a couple of early customers that and when I say customers, I mean these are big enterprise companies, right? They're you know $50 billion companies that were backing us, and so as a small line item in their budget, they were more looking at it strategically as instead of as a real expense. So they were very steady for us in terms of providing support, and that allowed us to fund the platform and grow it from there. So we survived kind of one, because we were still new and we didn't have a lot of expenses, but two, we had a couple of strategic customers that were wanting to back the initiative that we were undertaking.
Interesting. And you're in deep tech, right? How technical is the problem that you're solving?
Yeah, that's a good question. So really, when we think about our software, we think about it in two different ways. There's the software infrastructure, and then there is the technical part of the analysis. Um, with the with the technical part of the analysis, it is quite deep. It's focused on the expert there. Um, so, this is something where, most of our users are people that have, 3, 4, 5 years or more experience in the oil and gas industry. And, the methods that we use, go from, some quite simple methods to some things that are, very technically sophisticated. So, you know, it with respect to the domain expertise, this is a software where it really requires both software engineering skills on the infrastructure side, and that's where my co-founder, has a really strong background, and then the domain expertise, which is my area.
Right. And what's the cost of using your software?
So our we charge on a license model. It's an annual subscription, and it starts at around 13,600 per user, and depending on the options from that, it can go a bit higher.
Interesting. And your customers, I see some of them on your landing page. Why not crack, I don't know, a Shell or a gigantic oil and gas company? Do these take more time to crack?
Uh,
Like, are you going more mid-size?
no, well, we approach all sizes. What I'll say is that in a lot of our agreements that we sign with companies, we're not allowed to publicize that they're customers. So there are some of the name brand super majors, whose name that you would see on gas stations that are customers. Um, but we can't advertise all of those.
Right. And why would they use you instead of a competing solution? Like, what do you do that your competitors don't?
Yeah, so there's really there's a few different reasons. The first is the problem itself. A lot of our competing softwares were built back in the 90s and early 2000s, and they were designed for you know their legacy software is designed for addressing legacy problems. The industry has matured, the way we're drilling wells has changed, the technology's changed, and our software, as something that's still undergoing active development today, is better suited to the problems of today. So that's one reason. The second reason is, we have, we're blending different subdomains within oil and gas. So there are some competitors that are strictly focused on one aspect of the workflow, and we try to go across multiple workflows. So there's a pulling down a bit of the interdisciplinary silos there. So that's the second reason. I think the third reason is we're cloud based, and even though a lot of the newer companies in the oil and gas software space are cloud based, almost all the legacy solutions are still desktop softwares. Which creates challenges for collaborating with your coworkers. It means your license is often tied to a physical machine, or even if you pull out like the old-fashioned software key on a USB stick, which a lot of these softwares still require, you need to go plug it into a machine that's got two dual graphics cards, for example. Whereas the cloud-based software, you can run it from any machine, whether or not it's your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or a desktop computer. I mean, so those are the reasons that people generally go with us.
And you said that drilling went through a transformation. Let's say that I have my oil company. What's different than 10 to 20 years ago? Is it like the same diamond drills? Is it the same strategies? What changed in the last couple of decades?
Yeah. So what's changed? I mean, the biggest revolution has been going from what what we would call conventional type of plays to unconventional plays. And so what that means is historically, you might go out and you would drill a reservoir out in the Gulf of Mexico, or in parts of the country where there are these conventional sandstone reservoirs. And what that means is these reservoirs are often high porosity, so they have lots of storage space. They're high permeability, which means the oil and gas can flow through them quite easily. And you would go drill vertical wells in that field. So you would put the rig over a spot, you would drill a well straight down, and when you got to your target interval, you would produce that interval. Uh, when we move to unconventionals, which are what are called the shale plays, so you'll hear about shale oil and shale gas. What we started to do as an industry was to produce these reservoirs that were not considered prospective initially. They have very low storage properties, so very low porosity. It's very hard to flow oil or gas out of them, and so that required a technique called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, as you hear it termed. And at first there were a few companies that were focused on fracking these plays, and then they started drilling horizontally. So instead of drilling straight down, they would drill down and then they would turn the well sideways. And in doing that, they could then initiate several fracks, which has a multiplier effect to it. And they kept maturing and maturing and maturing the technology that allowed them to produce these tight rocks, and that has really transformed the industry. For example, it took the Bakken, um, which was nearly located up in North Dakota. It was in an area that was nearly dead in terms of oil and gas. They started drilling the Bakken formation horizontally using this new technology, and it ramped up over the course of a few years, from 100,000 barrels a day to 1 million plus barrels a day. Permian Basin, it was considered a tired old basin, considered very mature, and now it's the hottest play globally. Companies are drilling thousands of wells there per year. um, and it's really just been a game changer for everyone in oil and gas, especially in the let's say the U.S. and Canada.
And is it still a profitable play to be in oil and gas, granted that everything's going green and electric nowadays and that the barrel's price is sort of unstable nowadays?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll split that into two pieces. First of all, there's the price piece. Oil is a very cyclical commodity. If you look at it, it was prices spiked in the 70s with the oil embargo, then they crashed in the mid 80s, made a bit of a recovery. Then there was, Asian currency crisis. Once again, it recovered. Then there's a financial crisis, recovered. Then there was COVID, and and now we're at a modest oil price. And through each of those periods, of course, it was hard for the industry, right? People lost their jobs, companies went bankrupt, companies were forced to merge. But there's a saying in the industry that the best cure for high prices is high prices, and the best cure for low prices is low prices. And the reason for that is when prices are high, companies go out, they drill a lot of wells, that brings the price down. Most of the time, we end up over drilling as an industry, and the price will go below what's economic for most companies. And then after oil prices have been low for a few years, the number of companies drilling and the number of wells getting drilled goes down. and then the price will rise in response to that. And I feel like in the last handful of years, anyway, we've been in a very kind of stable place where companies are making they're making profits, but it's not been so excessively profitable, like it has been previously when oil's been at $100, that we've gone out and over drilled as an industry. I think the drillers have done a much better job at maintaining capital discipline. So, with price wise, there are times when you make money, there are times when you don't. And right now, we're in a reasonable spot. Although, of course, when oil starts to get closer to $50 a barrel, companies start to get nervous, of course. So that's the price side. Now, there's the energy transition that you mentioned, where we go from, the fossil fuel economy to perhaps a greener, solar, wind economy. Um, a couple of thoughts on that, which is, you know, first of all, there's a lot of coal that's still used globally. Coal is, in terms of emissions, is about the worst, fuel that you can use if you're concerned about CO2. And so switching over to natural gas, which burns significantly cleaner, is it's a win for the environment as a transition fuel. So I think the oil and gas industry has a place there. Secondly, is obviously solar and wind are intermittent, and there are obviously days where the wind doesn't blow, or at least not as much as normal. And at times like that, the grid needs backup. And what generally provides that backup are natural gas fired power plants. So, natural gas plays a very key role in stabilizing the electricity grid. And I don't think that's something that'll be changing for quite a while. And then, the big driver for oil is transportation. Obviously, there are a lot of companies uh, that are making hybrids and EVs these days. But just when you look at the sheer number of internal combustion engine cars that are on the road, this is a transition that will take decades. So I still think there are many years to run before we start to see a plateauing in the need for hydrocarbons. I mean, when I first started, 20 years ago, people were saying, hey, we're getting close to peak oil. And by that, they mean a peak in oil demand. But that's, that never materialized. Production and demand today are higher than they've ever been. And that's probably not a trend that's changing anytime in the next couple of decades, let's say.
And the demand of oil on a personal level or on a commercial level, or both in the
Uh,
US and or throughout the world?
I would say globally, um, you know, it's on a country by country basis. There can be a lot of mitigating factors, but in general, when you look at a country's industrial base, it requires a lot of hydrocarbons to support that. And so if you look at the use in the U.S., like yes, we have become more efficient in a lot of different ways. But when you think about the new economy and people talking about building out AI data centers and things like that, that needs a lot of energy in the very near term. And I think we're going to see a lot of that generated by modular natural gas turbines. I think if you look at several of the most recent data centers that have been stood up, they're stood up on the back of natural gas electricity production. So
Interesting. Tell me about the AI component of the platform. I think you're still coding nowadays. Is that like a moat that you have? The fact that you're using AI literally to analyze tons of data and feedback estimates to companies? Are you the only one doing that at the moment?
Yeah, so obviously AI is, quite the buzzword these days. Everyone wants to, slap an AI powered logo next to their, next to their company name. Um, we have tried to selectively use AI and machine learning in the platform to make people significantly more productive. So there's a number of places that you can use it in our software, and we focused on the ones that have been historical bottlenecks. So, uh, for example, when people are starting a new project in our software, uh, historically you would have to spend a lot of time on the data QC part. We have automated a lot of that process, and excuse me, and have selectively been using AI and machine learning to assist with that, to make it where you can skip over a lot of the initial manual process that people would have done and go straight to the QC phase. We can use it also in the QC phase to help really focus people um, on where there are places where they still need to go do maybe a more traditional manual intervention on a piece of data. So we've tried to use it in ways that are real multipliers of people's productivity. And there's also some places where we are able to use it to allow people to do new types of analyses. So a lot of our AI isn't focused on you know putting in data, getting out an answer. It's focused on putting in data, getting out enhanced data that will allow you to go do a deeper analysis. Um, and part of the challenge on the AI front in oil and gas is um, trying to figure out exactly how we can go about training these models and uh, making them more robust to the broad variety of geology that we see. So, we focused on methods that are a lot more broad and globally applicable. I think if you were to dive into geographically specific areas, you could do a lot more with that. And that's something that we focus on providing the infrastructure to our customers so that our customers can do that using their more localized expertise.
Got it. What's been challenging about running this company? I've heard that the go-to-market side is quite hard to get a hold of these engineers or these decision makers in big oil and gas companies. What's been challenging so far?
Yeah, so that's you hit the nail on the head with that one. The biggest challenge that we've always had is the top of the funnel type of marketing. So, you know, when we first started, I had a pretty deep list of connections, people that I knew in the industry that I was able to leverage my relationship to, get the software in front of decision makers. That only gets you, as most founders know, that only gets you through about the first couple of months, and then all of a sudden you've used up all your connections, and then you have to start talking to strangers, and that has been a really big challenge. When uh, you know initially when we first started pre-COVID, if you wanted to do sales, you had to do it in person. You had to show up to someone's office, and that's just a slow, inefficient process. And then during COVID, which was kind of a blessing in disguise for us as a software company, um, all of a sudden people were willing to take meetings on Teams and Skype and Zoom and whatnot, and so that allowed us to broaden out a bit and make our sales process more. It meant that physically being on location was no longer the bottleneck. But as you mentioned, it is very hard getting the subject matter experts on the phone to do that discovery call. So I think that's where our biggest challenge has been in consistently making contact with people, because there's probably somewhere on the order of, I don't know, 50 to 100,000 people in the industry that we should talk to, that meet our target customer persona in terms of job title, experience, job description. Um, and we've only been able to make contact with a small fraction of those, just because it's tough doing that outreach consistently and getting through to the end user, as opposed to going straight to voicemail.
Right. Well, Cameron, thank you for coming on today. Where can people find out more about you and the company?
Yeah, so to learn more about the company, check out our website. It's www.danomics.com. I often post company updates and product updates to my LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. And that's about all we do for social. We do have a YouTube channel that people can check out. If you just search for Danomics, you'll find about 100 different videos out there that highlight the software and will provide you an overview of some of what it can do for your company.
I was Cameron Snow.